Hi. Empathy. What does that mean? What does it mean for me? And why? So, as part of round 5 of the Moral Monkey contest, we have to reflect on the topic of empathy and effectively go through the process of asking ourselves, what does empathy mean? And then progressing through demonstrating and showing those empathetic acts. So, this is the first part of that, reflecting on what empathy means to me. So, empathy, for me, basically, I put it down to the act of thinking about life as though you're in someone else's shoes. To try and, empathize with their perspective, so experience life from their perspective, and basically trying to get to the point where you feel as though they would feel. Hopefully, you can then use that to change your actions or just help the people and hopefully ultimately the world around you. I hosted a clubhouse earlier in the week, and one of the things that came from that discussion was the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy being the idea where you sympathize with someone or you try and, in a way, feel sorry for them because perhaps they're, I guess you just feel sorry for them. So I probably should have looked up the definition for sympathy. Empathy, in counter to sympathy, is, for me, the idea of actually being there with the person as opposed to, looking down and projecting what they must be feeling. Empathy is the act of actually trying to experience what they must be feeling. So one of the examples that I sort of use with this, which came to me during this discussion, was imagining there's someone that's in a hole. Say you're walking along the road and you turn to your right and you see, there's a person down in that hole. The sympathetic approach would be to effectively, feel sorry for them and the fact that they're in that hole and probably be like, oh man, that really sucks for you. I'm sorry. Here's a shovel. Good luck getting out. The empathetic approach would be to see that person in the hole and jump down in there with them. To get in there, experience what things might be like, and to offer to help get them out there. I think the difficult thing, and this is based off my, reading and podcast alter life. I read a lot of books and podcasts. The difficult thing with something like empathy is when assumptions come into play. And I think perhaps the most important thing, at least for me now that I'm reflecting on it, when it comes to empathy, is never assuming what it's like for someone else in a situation. The empathetic approach always needs to be trying to lead with mindfulness, with listening, to try and understand what it's like for them. You're never going to fully be able to feel life as though they're feeling it. But you can come a hell of a lot closer than what you might if you don't take the time to actually experience that, to listen, to be present. So for me, empathy is the act of trying to live life as though you're in someone else's shoes. But knowing that you can never fully get to that complete experience, but you can certainly take steps towards it. And even through the act of being there and being present and trying to take the time to feel without assuming, being mindful of what perspective is like, I'd argue that you can make the world a hell of a lot better by actually doing that. And just being sympathetic for someone doesn't really actually mean you're taking action to make things better, right? Empathy, you actually need to be there with someone, to take action, to be there, to be present, to listen. So for me, empathy is the act of actually being active in your compassion. And I guess one of the reasons why I think that, and sort of how this perspective has come about, is through the sport called Ultimate Frisbee. So it's played all throughout the world, and even at the top level, it is self-refereed. So when you're competing, if there's a disagreement, it's something that you have to take the time to pause, to reflect on, firstly, the call itself, why it was made, what your perspective is on it, but then secondly, take the time to empathise and to try and understand where your opponent is coming from. Example being, you're both running for something, you jump, and there's a collision in the air, there's been a call made. The actual act of being present, processing why that's occurred, what it might mean, I would argue you have to be empathetic towards the other side, assuming you want to get to a good result at the end of it. So for me, that's a great reference point to understand the act of being empathetic, even in a situation that's hard. Competing in the fire of the moment is sometimes very difficult to take the pause, to act with empathy, and to reflect on that. So that's kind of where my perspective comes from. The other part is from reading, from podcasts, as I mentioned. Empathy is one of those things that it's hard to do without being present, and you're never going to fully achieve complete parallels of experience, but you can get closer. And I think the act of actually being there and taking time to do that, in a way, is a huge step. So for me, empathy is defined as the act of being present with someone, trying to experience life as though you're in their shoes, and then using that to act and make the world a little bit better. So that's me, empathy. I've been Lockie. What do you define empathy as?